If this was Manu Samoa's team, could they genuinely win the Rugby World Cup? A culture full of genetics made to fit a rugby body. Similar to what I did when I covered how good Tonga could be, you need to assume every player eligible to play for Manu Samoa is on the books. Did you know only 10 years ago, Samoa were ranked 7th in the world? They recently fell all the way down to 17th in the world rankings before climbing back up to 11th. I'm making a big move to start this video. Pat Lamb from the Bristol Bears as head coach. Welcome to the team, Pat. In the front row we have Scott Sio, Asafo Amua and Nipo Laulala. 110 caps collectively as props, Sio and Laulala are two veterans of professional rugby, complemented by the explosive unlimited potential of Asafo Amua. While Amua was overlooked for the All Blacks, he's still an incredibly good hooker who will punish any soft defensive line. I like this front row and think it's pretty solid. Moving on to the second row, we have Patrick Tuipolotu and Stephen Luatua. Two tall and heavy locks that will be great in weighing down the scrum and getting up at the line out. This pairing would undoubtedly increase the average offloads of Manu Samoa as they shred teams through the middle with their strength and length. In the back row, we have an entire All Blacks back row. Akira Ioane, Dalton Papali'i and Ardie Savea. Growing in experience, these three players are in the midst of hitting their prime. Ardie is arguably the best player running around in world rugby at the moment. It would be hard to find a back row that would outwork these three across the park for an entire 80 minutes. A real strength of this Samoan outfit. If I'm the coach, I'm loving this forward pack. It seems very balanced. In the halves, we have Jonathan Taumatini and Richie Mo'unga. It's an interesting halves combination, with Richie the Magician Mo'unga and mostly fringe player Jonathan Taumatini. No disrespect to Taumatini, but I wouldn't really consider him a top tier player. His only real job in the team would be to give Richie good service, which kind of suits his game. The combination would still be decent with these two, but I'm not convinced. Man, I really wish Kamfo to Elite E didn't hang up the boots. On a side note, I know I used Richie in the Tongan side, but the reality is he's eligible for both teams, so why not use him? Worst case, we could replace him with Wallaby, Matt Tamua. Now, getting on to the centres, Manu Tuolangi and Anton Linnett-Brown. This is a super experienced centre pairing. Tuolangi's destructive ball running with Linnett-Brown's top tier support play. They would be really solid in defence together, and Linnett-Brown is crafty as an outside centre. It would definitely be better to have these two on your team than to play against them. And now the back three, another All Blacks contingent. Caleb Clark, Rieko Ioane and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. Each of these players will feature for the All Blacks at the World Cup, and all three can make something out of absolutely nothing. In terms of strategy, we could run into a bit of trouble with all three of these players probably preferring to run the ball before kicking it. The running lines and threat each of these players would bring to the side would cause so many moments of panic for the defending team. The bench was incredibly difficult to pick with so many experienced and informed Samoan players. Covering the hooker position on the bench, I've got Weenie Antonio, although Brendan Panga-Amosa would be just as good. In the prop positions, I've got Charlie Faumuina and Alan Alala-Toa. In lock and back row, I've got Will Skelton and Lukan Salakaia-Loto. Lima Sopawanga as the fly half, Bundy Aki to cover the centres, and Jordan Pataya at the back. Yep, this team doesn't disappoint. The centre pairing of Manu Tuolangi and Anton Linnett-Brown would be so bloody good in attack and defence. The forward pack also is massive and very physical. It's a great balance when it comes to set piece, and I think they'd have the heaviest scrum in world rugby, especially when Big Will Skelton gets on off the bench. And also the bench is just super high impact and could shift the momentum of any game. The only weakness I see here is what I mentioned, Taumatini at 9. I'd be very tempted to give the likes of maybe Tim Nanai-Williams a crack at scrum half over Taumatini. Does anyone have a solution to the halfback issue here? I mean, the rest of the team is absolute quality. Across the park, they have all bases pretty well covered, and I reckon they'd be a top 5 team for sure. What's really interesting about this team is they could actually top Pool D at the Rugby World Cup. It's more than possible that they could beat Argentina, Japan and England, and if they did progress throughout the pool stages, they'd then go on to verse either Australia or Wales in the quarterfinals, which they could be every chance of winning. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would you prefer to see stacked Pacific Island teams, or do you enjoy international rugby the way it is?